An estuary is where fresh water from rivers and streams meets and mixes with salt water from the ocean. This partially enclosed body of water is home to some of the most productive environments on the earth, creating more organic matter each year than areas of forest, grassland, and agricultural land, according to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. An estuary is actually 20 times more productive than the open sea. Habitats that can be found in estuaries include shallow open waters, marshes, swamps, beaches, rocky shores, oyster reefs, mangrove forests, river deltas, and tidal pools. The diversity of habitats enclosed in estuaries supports the enormous abundance and diversity of species that can be found. So why is there so much biodiversity in an estuary? The salinity in the water of an estuary changes over the tidal cycle. This happens when the less dense fresh water flows out near the surface and the denser salt water flows inward near the bottom, creating what is called the halocline. A halocline is the intermediate layer of oceanic water in which salinity increases more rapidly with depth than the layers above and below it. This region of change creates different life zones and a great variation in abiotic conditions. In order to live in an estuary, plants and animals must be able to adapt to a wide range of depths and salinities because salt in dissolved water applies osmotic pressure on the cell walls of organisms and dehydrates them. Some organisms have evolved special physical structures over time to cope with the constantly changing salinity that allow them to retain body fluids in the presence of salt. An example of an organism that can adapt to the salinity changes is an oyster. During low tides with low salinity in the water, they close up their shells and stop feeding. Once the salinity increases in the water again, they open back up. An organism that can tolerate a wide range of salinity is called a euryhaline. An organism that can tolerate only slight salinity changes is called a stenohaline. Another reason biodiversity is so high is because estuaries are host to many visitors throughout the year. Due to the absence of marine predators, fish like salmon are able to spawn away from their full salinity conditions in the ocean. Estuaries are so important to us because we rely on them for food, jobs, commerce, and recreation. Commercial and recreational fishing, boating, and tourism provide for 28 million jobs a year. On top of that, fishing generates over $111 billion a year. We are always around estuaries. Of the 32 largest cities in the world, 22 are located on estuaries. Since we live so close to estuaries, the human impacts on them can be big and detrimental. We as humans are a major part of why estuaries are some of the most polluted areas in the world. We as humans are responsible for the creation of dead zones in estuaries. Excess nutrients like metals, oil, pesticides, and bacteria either run off or are piped as wastewater, and they stimulate an overgrowth in algae, which eventually sinks down and decomposes in the water, consuming all of the available oxygen. As a result, they make no oxygen available to marine or plant life. This process is called eutrophication and causes low oxygen levels or dead zones with no life or oxygen in deep water. Toxins and pollutants from runoff can also accumulate in the tissues of many species of aquatic life and kill them. People have done large-scale draining, filling, and damming in estuaries, which causes an immediate loss of habitat. In fact, 38% of wetlands have been lost to these tactics in the United States. One way we can all help is by conserving water in our everyday lives. Always remember to pick up your trash and don't be the person who litters. Street and storm drains empty into rivers and streams that drain into estuaries and eventually cause pollution. Always remember to dispose of household and yard chemicals carefully, following disposal directions on labels to avoid toxic runoff into water. Last but not least, do not overfish. Follow catch and release practices to keep more fish alive. It is so important that we keep this vital biome healthy for generations to come.
Not too often do you get all this neatness in one location. That's called nature.